Hello and welcome to Right Sports Talk. My name is Zach. We are a little over 2 weeks away from the beginning of NFL free agency. We are in the time period where players are in contract negotiations with their current teams, or trying to get extensions, or teams are signing players to franchise tags right now. So, what I thought I would do, because I am a New England Patriots fan, it's something that I've mentioned a few times on this channel. I thought I would go through and just kind of go give my off-season wish list, my pre-free agency wish list for what I would like to see the New England Patriots do in the off-season in free agency. So starting off, guys that are going to be free agents for New England that I would like to see them keep. The top two are Mike Owenu, their offensive lineman, and their safety Kyle Duggar. Whether that is franchise tagging one of them or giving both of them long-term extensions. I would like to see both of those players back in New England. Mike Owenu is arguably their best offensive lineman. You can argue maybe David Andrews is up there in terms of who else will be their best lineman, but Mike Owenu is a player that they could put almost anywhere on the offensive line at guard or tackle, and he is going to have a good year. He's going to play well, whether you kick him at the tackle or keep him in at guard. And Kyle Duggar is a player who's been tremendous for them in the secondary, a very good safety for them. He was a player that when New England drafted him back in 2020, I was very confused as to why they were picking such a small school safety in the second round and weren't waiting, till later in the draft to try and get this small school guy. Well, now I wish they had picked him in the first round and had been able to use a fifth-year option on him because he has produced that well. So those are the top two guys that I really would like to see them keep. Other guys that I was hoping they would keep, but the next two guys I'm going to talk about are guys that I was hoping they would keep, but now it doesn't look likely because they didn't reach extensions yet, or didn't agree to extensions, and that's Kendrick Bourne, their wide receiver, and Trent Brown, their offensive tackle. It looks like both guys are going to try to test out free agency. That doesn't necessarily mean that New England isn't going to be able to get a deal done with them, with one or both of them, but it just looks like they're going to go try and field other offers and see what else is out there. I would also like to see them bring back both Hunter Henry and Pharaoh Brown. Hunter Henry he's a very good tight end. If they can keep him for a few more years, it would be really nice to see. They're really good for that offense. And Pharaoh Brown is a guy that has worked with their current offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, in Cleveland. So he's a guy that kind of knows that system, and he didn't have a bad year last year. He did pretty well last year for a guy that New England signed right before the season, right after the preseason, signed to the practice squad and then pulled up to the active roster. He had, a good year. I would also like to see them, getting in a little bit into draft stuff. If they keep Hunter Henry and Pharaoh Brown, I'd like to see them kind of draft a tight end that can develop behind those two guys. Some guys on my list of tight ends that you could draft and develop, or you could put in as blocking backs, or occasionally out as in the receiving game, is Eric All from Iowa, Jaheim Bell from Florida State, Ben Sinott from Kansas State, and AJ Barner from Michigan. I think those are all guys that you could hopefully get day 3 and in the draft, and just kind of have them in that rotation at tight end, and they won't have to worry about being the number 1 tight end. So next 1 or 2 players I'd see them back. I'd like to see them bring back either Josh Uche or Anthony Jennings. It'd be awesome if they could keep both of them and have kind of both of them, rotate in as pass rushers with Matthew Judon on the other side. But if they decide that they only want to keep one, then I'd like that I'm okay with that. Yeah, I would like to be able to see them keep either one or both of Anthony Jennings and Josh Uche. I think they're very good young players that can help that defense. And now moving on to the last guy that is going to be a free agent for them that I would like to see them bring back is I'd kind of like to see them bring back Ezekiel Elliott, running back, because he played very well when Ramondre Stevenson got injured, and he also seemed like he was a very good um, just kind of piece to have in that offense. Even when Ramondre was healthy, you could put Zeke in and get him some touches, and he would play very well. I know he's getting up there in age for a running back. He's what 28 years old, so a little on the older side for a running back. But if he's somebody that is not going to be the full-time starter for your team for New England, I think he's a very good piece to bring in, especially because they don't have a whole lot of depth at running back. I'm going to talk a little bit later of what I would like to see them do if they don't bring Zeke back. So right now, I'd like to see them bring Zeke back and kind of keep him working in with Ramondre Stevenson. And I'm moving in to guys I would like to see them sign. I think one of their number one, their biggest need that they need to address in free agency with what is available in free agency is they need to bring in a number one wide receiver. Now, the number one choice I have for that was T. Higgins, but he's been franchise tagged by the Bengals, so can't just bring him in. They would have to trade for him, which I don't see them doing. So the number one option I see is Mike Evans. If they can bring in Mike Evans, that gives them a legitimate number one wide receiver for at least the next few years. I know it's speculated Mike Evans is going to either stay in Tampa Bay with Baker Mayfield if they re-sign Baker, or if the Chiefs get enough free cap space, they'll try to go after Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans should really be like the number one priority at wide receiver. Now, if they can't get Mike Evans, I would like to see them get either still guys that could be number one wide receivers for them, and that's either Calvin Ridley or Michael Pittman Jr. I think I see them both as guys that can, come in and be that number one guy for them, and they can have, good seasons and, can come in and pull away the number one, corner, whatever, from a team, allowing, New England's other receivers to try and, make plays. Moving on to some guys that I don't see as like number one wide receivers, but especially if they can't keep Kendrick Bourne, these are a couple of guys that I would like to see them try to bring in, and that's either Curtis Samuel from the Commanders or Tyler Boyd from Cincinnati. Those are both guys that I see they could come in and be contributors at wide receiver, be very good number two receivers, but I don't see them as guys that New England should bring in to be number ones, be their number one, leading receiver. But they're guys that I could see New England try to, if they come to New England, especially if they lose Kendrick Bourne, they could fill that Kendrick Bourne slot as a very good number two receiver that can put up numbers and produce for them. Moving on, next, they need some offensive line depth. This offensive line, at least in terms of like tackles that are available in free agency, isn't great. But there's a few names that I've got that I would like to see them try to bring in. Number one, this guy that's kind of been linked to them, like rumored to them, and that's Jonah Williams from the Bengals. I know he's a guy that has had some injury issues in the past. Like he's had some injury issues basically his entire career. But I think he's a guy that if New England, brought him in and then drafted a younger guy to just kind of be behind him that could go in if Jonah Williams goes down, fine with that. And if Jonah Williams can somehow go the entire season as their starting left tackle, even better. That's fantastic. But I just don't I can see New England bringing him in, but if they wanted an offensive lineman that hasn't been able to stay healthy, they should just keep Trent Brown, because I think talent-wise, Trent Brown is better than Jonah Williams, and they both kind of have the same injury concerns. Next is Josh Nijman from the Packers. He's kind of a younger guy that just see them. He could come in and he could be their starter at left tackle. Just put him on that, put him at tackle, put him at left tackle, and he could just be a solid starter for him. And the last guy is Donovan Smith from the Chiefs. Another guy that they could just bring him in and he could be their starter. So start for him. Probably be a very solid starter. And be happy with that. It would be a solid starting left tackle is better than the Patriots have had in a long time. Moving on, there's a couple of offensive guards that I'd like to see them try to bring in. I know they drafted Cole Strange 2 years ago in the first round, but he's coming off some injury concerns. He hasn't really played the best, especially as a pass protector. He hasn't really been the best for New England. A couple of guys that I could see them try to pursue. They could bring him in for a couple of years. That's Kevin Zeitler from the Ravens and Cody Whitehair, who just recently got released from the Bears. Those are two guys that you could bring them in, plug them in at guard, and could be solid contributors, be very good starters for their team. And a guy that you could bring in a little bit more long term would be Dalton Reisner from Minnesota. He also played in Denver. He's a little younger than Zeitler and Whitehair, so you could get probably a little bit more longevity out of him if you wanted to bring in somebody that was more of a long-term solution at guard. So now my scenario, if Zeke doesn't stay, I've got a few running backs that I would kind of like to see them bring in that I think would also work well in that offense behind Ramondre Stevenson. So guys that wouldn't have to be the number one running back, they can come in, they can get touches, they can, maybe if they had to start some games, they could. But start off, Clyde Edwards-Helaire from the Chiefs. I've also got Jerick McKinnon from the Chiefs. If they don't come back, I think they'd be very solid running backs. Especially Jerick McKinnon, especially the receiving game behind Ramondre Stevenson, would be very good. The other two I've got is Tony Pollard from the Cowboys. I think we saw last year that Tony Pollard works better when he doesn't have to be the focal point. He doesn't have to be that bruiser on offense. He can come in, third down, come in passing situations, come in when you can kind of run him in a zone off, give him some zone plays to run. He's not that big bruising running back. He's not that guy that you got to put in at the 2-yard line and he's gonna get you a touchdown. He's not that guy that third and short, fourth and short, you're just gonna hand him the ball at the middle and he's gonna get a first down. Well, in New England, behind Ramondre Stevenson, he doesn't have to do that. Ramondre can handle those short yardage situations. Ramondre can be the power guy, and Tony Pollard can be that speed out in open space type guy. And the last guy that I'd like to see New England, if they could bring in, if they bring in one running back, is Antonio Gibson from the Commanders. And it would be kind of a very similar role. He played in Washington behind Brian Robinson. He doesn't have to be the power guy. He can be the get in space guy, receiving guy, kind of similar to Tony Pollard. Yeah, so Antonio Gibson can, be a guy that doesn't need to be the power back, doesn't need to be the feature back, but if needed, he can start games for you. He can be a, starter for a few games for you. Now, really, no matter what New England does in free agency for running backs, if they keep Zeke or bring in some other running back, if Zeke leaves, I would also like to see them draft a running back. And some names of guys for, players that I would kind of like to see them draft is somebody like a Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, if he falls to the, day 3 of the draft. Ray Davis from Kentucky, Rasheen Ali from Marshall, even though he's coming off of an injury, he just tore his bicep at the week of the Senior Bowl. But another guy that can come in and not have to be the featured back. He can you can play him sporadically. Dylan Laub from New Hampshire, who can also come in and be a very big receiving threat for them. Would be nice. Cody Schrader from Missouri, and a guy that I really like a lot that is kind of building some hype up towards the draft is Isaiah Davis from South Dakota State. He's a guy that got a small school, but it's a school that has won the FCS title the past 2 years. They've been very dominant, and he's been a very, very good running back for them. So it's a guy that I could see if New England has an opportunity to bring him in late in the draft. I would like to see that happen. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, kind of what I would like to see them do is most of these guys are just kind of for depth pieces, or just kind of get in that, just they can play in some situations. First off, middle linebacker. Middle linebacker. These are all guys that could be more like pass coverage guys for them, because they've got Jawan Bentley, who is a very good run defender middle linebacker, but he's not all that fast. Like, he's okay in coverage, but he's not the fastest guy in the world. So there's just some kind of linebackers that I would like to see them bring in that can be more coverage guys and can be more like third down linebacker guys. The first one is Devin White from Tampa Bay. He's incredibly fast. He kind of got pushed down the depth chart in Tampa Bay, and I would like to see, wouldn't mind if New England brought him in. Another guy is Devin Bush from he was on Seattle this past season. Before that, he was in Pittsburgh. He was a first-round draft pick that didn't really develop into that number one middle linebacker that Pittsburgh thought he could be. But again, he's a guy that could be a very good, bring him in on third down situations. Very good coverage linebacker. Also, Quan Alexander would be nice. Another good coverage linebacker. And the big one here is Patrick Queen from recently played for the Ravens. Very fast linebacker, very good linebacker. The only reason I really have him on this list is because I don't know if Baltimore can afford to keep him, and if Baltimore can't afford to keep him in Baltimore, I think New England should just pick him right up at free agency. Bring him right in, be the top linebacker that they bring in, the top defensive player they bring in. Moving on to some corners, some guys that I think be outside corners to put on the other side of Christian Gonzalez. So you can have Christian Gonzalez on the outside, some player they bring in from free agency on the outside, and keep Jonathan Jones just kind of in the slot. First one has been rumored to New England as soon as it was announced that Miami was going to be letting him go, and that's Xavier Howard, who is a very good corner, but he's a guy that has had some injury issues. So New England just had a bunch of injury issues last season. They had, at one point in time, I think all 4 of their top corners were out. So Miles Bryant was their number 1 corner, and that's never a good thing. So if Xavier Howard can come in and stay healthy, it's a great option. But he does have the injury concerns. Next is Adoree Jackson from the Giants. I think would be a good fit for New England to just kind of place on the outside and just let him be a coverage guy on the outside corner. And the last guy is Shaquille Griffin, who I think just fits that same role of can put him on the outside and can be be on the outside and the opposite side of Christian Gonzalez. Last defensive position I'm going to talk about is defensive line. They do need some defensive line depth pieces, especially since they let Guy go. So just some kind of defensive line pieces that could rotate in, just behind other guys. That's Dante Fowler Jr., Emmanuel Ogbao, and Derek Barnett. They're all guys that I can see just come in. You can play them throughout the game, and you can just keep rotating your guys out. But defensive line is definitely a position where you need some depth and need the ability to kind of cycle guys through. So if you could bring in any of those three guys, just to help with that defensive line depth, that'd be very good for them. And the last thing we're going to talk about is, quarterback. I don't think that they'll bring in like Kirk Cousins or Baker Mayfield to be like, their guy, be their consistent starter. But I think if they brought in like, a veteran quarterback that they could come in and just kind of like, if need be, could start some games for them, but could also just be a mentor to a young quarterback, whether that is them getting one in the draft, or even if they stick with Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi, because they're both relatively young quarterbacks. Mac Jones has only been in the league for 3 years. Bailey Zappi's been in for 2. They've never really had, I guess they kind of had Brian Hoyer, but they've never really had like, a guy that has been that has started consistently in the NFL mentor them. And a couple of guys that I think could be good options for that is Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew. Both players have shown that they can come in and start in the NFL, but they don't have to. But in this situation, they wouldn't have to be the starter for the season. They could, maybe be the starter at the beginning of the year, and then see how a young guy develops behind them, and then hand the reins over. Jacoby Brissett is somebody that also familiar with Alex Van Pelt from the season he spent in Cleveland when Deshaun Watson was suspended for 11 games back in 2022. And Jacoby Brissett, he plays well when he gives him the opportunity to start. He's just not a guy that's going to really carry your team on his back. Same with Gardner Minshew. He can play well when given the opportunity to start. He almost helped bring the Colts to the playoffs this past season and played very well. So those are two guys that, like, if you wanted to bring in kind of like a cheaper veteran quarterback that could have a young player develop behind him, or even if the young player starts to start the season, could still kind of mentor them. So that's kind of my thoughts on really my pre-free agency wish list for New England. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If there's anybody that you would like to see New England bring in that I didn't talk about, or maybe some guys that you didn't think about that I brought up. You can just let me know in the comments. Until next time, see ya.